The idea for the race was based on extremes. Run from Death Valley, the single hottest and lowest point in the US, to the top of Mount Whitney, one of the coldest and highest. At one end, temperatures could reach 130 degrees. On the other, well below freezing. And the 146 miles between those 2 points could bring any type of weather imaginable. But despite the extremes of this race, as well as the fact that it hadn't been done before, 5 athletes were crazy enough to begin the journey. A bit over 5 days later, all 5 had finished. Today is Thursday, July 31st, 2025, and on this day in 1987, the first ever Badwater Ultramarathon began in Death Valley, California. In this episode, we'll discuss the origins of this race, why it was shortened from the original 146 miles to the current 135, and then speak with Eleanor Robinson, the woman who won the first edition of the race 38 years ago today. I'm your host, Running Up That Hillary, and you are listening to Today in Running History. It's called the world's toughest foot race for a reason. Running 135 miles within 48 hours is challenging enough. Scaling 3 mountain ranges for a total elevation gain of 14,600 feet is even more challenging. And doing both in some of the most extreme weather on Earth is more challenging still. In the 15 years or so leading up to the inaugural Badwater Ultramarathon, a handful of people had traversed the 146-mile route between Badwater and Death Valley to the very top of Mount Whitney, although none of them had done so in the form of a race. In 1973, a British man named Ken Crutchlow had completed the route with a friend in the form of a relay. In 1986, 2 men from California tried to make an official race a reality, but were unable to secure liability insurance. So those men, Mike Whitwer and Tom Crawford, decided to conquer the route on their own. The pair finished in just under 3 days. The following year, Crutchlow teamed up with ultra runner and fellow Brit Eleanor Robinson, and Crawford teamed up with fellow American Jean Innes, who had recently finished her first Western States 100. It was to be a UK versus US team challenge. A journalist named David Balling, who had covered some of Ken Crutchlow's previous escapades, joined the group as the 5th and final runner, though he was not part of either team. The race began at 6 a.m. California time exactly 38 years ago today. The American team planned to run together, but Eleanor Robinson did not want to be tethered to her teammate and chose to run alone. Instead, Crutchlow ended up running with Balling, the journalist. Robinson led the entire time, though at one point the American pair was just a few minutes behind her. She regained her lead and ultimately won in a time of 2 days, 4 hours, and 45 minutes. Crawford and Innes finished a few hours later in 2 days, 10 hours, and 57 minutes. Balling and Crutchlow took their time, and the pair eventually finished in 5 days and 6.5 hours. I could give y'all more information about the race, but I would much rather hear it from someone who was actually there. And so without further ado, I would like to welcome Eleanor Robinson, the champion of the first ever Badwater Ultramarathon, to Today in Running History.
All right, I am here with Eleanor Robinson, the first place winner of the very first Badwater Ultra. Now, how are you, Eleanor?
Oh, I'm fine, thank you. It's a lovely day here in England. Very warm, unusually for us. So we're enjoying a good summer at the moment.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear that. Now, Badwater was not your first foray into running or even ultra running at that. Why don't you tell us about how you got into running and what that journey looked like?
Well, how I got into, I've always been very active, right from being a small child. And running was in my family. My elder brothers joined the local athletics club, so I did likewise. And it was always evident that I was better at long distances. but they weren't allowed for women when I was younger. And it was only when I was in my 30s and had a young family that I had the opportunity to run longer distances. And I was focusing on marathons. Although just because that we were able to do it. And I had in mind to do a marathon a particular weekend. And I saw in our local newspaper a small article about a 12-hour track race being held at one of the Nottingham University running tracks. And the least distance you could run on the track was the marathon. And I thought, I've never run a marathon on a track before. I hadn't actually run many marathons at all at that point. I thought it'll be a new experience. I've got my 3 young children. They can play on the infield in the sandpit, and I can keep an eye on them while I'm running. And
Such
so
a
that's
cool moment.
I entered this 12-hour race with in mind to do the marathon distance. But I must admit, I got running. The children were happy. I was happy, and everything went well. So I carried on, and it was only when I got to 46 miles, the race organizer came up to me and said, Eleanor, if you carry on running at this pace, you'll break the women's world record. And I looked at him in astonishment and said, oh, don't be daft. Of course I won't. I knew nothing about world records. I had no idea that there was a women's world record. I was just a runner. And I said to one of my club mates who was in the race as well, I said, I've just been told I'm going to break the world record. Do you know anything about women's world records for, 50 miles? And he said, no. I said, well, look, I think it's a joke, but what if it isn't? So he said, well, I tell you what, I'll go and inquire. So he finished his lap and went and spoke to the race organizer and came back and he said, no, he said, it's for real. And I said, oh, I'm not sure. I think they're just pulling my leg and it's, it's just a joke. But I said, so I ran the next few miles with this turmoil going on inside my head. No, this can't be right. This can't be true. But what if it is? It might just be, and I got this battle going on all the time. And in the end, I came to the conclusion, well, it might be, so I'd better just make a good job of this. And so, of course, as I got to the last couple of laps, I really put the effort in. And I got to the 50-mile point and immediately crossed the line and stopped. I was absolutely out of it. And the rest of the spectators and the runners were shouting at me, you can't stop, you can't stop. I said, what do you mean? I've done the 50 mile. And they said, but you've got to do another 6 laps just in case the lap recorders have made any errors. Don't forget, there was no chip timing. There was just a group of lap people sat at a table recording the time. Every single lap that their runner did was recorded on a sheet. And all those sheets and all those times had to be scrutinized afterwards to ensure. And of course, I knew nothing about this. So I picked myself up and thought, right, here goes. And I'll do another 6 laps. So I did my 6 laps. And then I thought, I don't care what anybody says. They could offer me £1 million. There is no way I can do any more.
Wow.
So I crawled into my little tent. Of course, as you can imagine, I was soaking wet.
Oh, I'm sure.
It was a hot day. I've been throwing water over myself. Of course, everybody had been encouraging me. And I was absolutely exhausted. So I lay in my tent for a while. I listened to everything that was going on. And after I don't know how long, maybe half an hour, I heard these footsteps coming up to the tent, and my clubmate put his head into the flap, and he said, "Are you right in there?" And I said, "Yeah, yeah." He says, "Well, come on then, get yourself back out on the track. We've got a team race to run here." And I'd completely forgotten that I'd agreed that I'd be part of my local club's team. So I obviously I put dry clothes on by then, put my shoes back on, got out onto the track, and I could hardly go in from the other. I was so stiff. I was so tired. And so, but eventually I got myself walking, and I thought, I've got nothing else to do for the rest of the day, so I might as well. So I carried on, and at the end of the 12 hours, I finished second in the race with, I think it was 72 miles. And I had actually broken 3 world records that I knew nothing about.
That's incredible.
So that was the start. It was just a chance, an opportunity, a fluke, whatever you would like to call it. It just happened. And it was so funny because I can remember the next day I was in so much pain. And, everything hurt. Even the hairs on my head hurt. And I stood in my garden and I looked up to the heavens and I said, "God, why couldn't you make me a sprinter?" I did. Oh, yes. But anyway, that obviously to break 3 world records that I hadn't known about, I hadn't trained for, I'd had no preparation for. I thought, obviously, this is my distance. And
Clearly.
yeah, the powers that be in at that time got hold of me and said, "Look, come on, you've got to do this race, and you've got to do that race, and you've got to do the other." And of course, at that time, it was all very low key, very amateurish. There was no particular structure. There was just a group of ultra runners in Britain that were doing these sort of events, and there was 6-day events throughout the world. There was one in New York, there was one in Australia, there was one in France, there was one in Britain, that were already established. And they said to me, "Come on, how about you enter the 6-day race in Nottingham, the next one?" And but you have to do a 24-hour race, and you have to do at least 100 miles to qualify. So I said, "Well, I've not done the preparation for this year's race, but I am interested. I will qualify. I'll do a 24-hour race somewhere, and yeah, I'll have a go at the 6-day race." So that's what I did. I was sensible enough to know that I hadn't got the preparation at that time. I was training to be a marathon runner, not a 6-day runner. So I went through the hoops. I entered a 24-hour race. I got my 124 mile, and in fact, in that race, I was the first female in Britain to win a mixed race.
Wow.
Yeah. So when I obviously got into these international events, I realized that it was opening a doorway for me, an opportunity to travel, an opportunity to see what I could actually do if I did trained for it. Because obviously at this point I hadn't. I was looking at being a marathon runner, and I was a mum with 3 small children, so it opened up a new opportunity for me, and a different sort of life. And I couldn't resist it. I wanted to know what I could get out of myself. And there was no money in the sport then. It was purely amateur. And I got round the world because the race organizers offered me a flight. they would put me up in somebody's house or a caravan, or, and I traveled around the world on a shoestring. Where I could, I took my kids with me. And as they got older, it got a bit more difficult because obviously of schooling and what have you. But then I took on work as a supply teacher so that I could juggle the races and work. And, I organized my life so that I could become an ultra distance runner and pursue my dreams. And, when the World Championship became possible for ultra distance, I wanted to do it. I wanted to have a go and just see, could I be a world champion as well as, amassing these world records? And it really was just, just curiosity. I wanted to know whether just this ordinary person from not an advantaged background in any way, shape, or form, whether I could do something special, a bit different. And yeah, I had a great life doing it, and it was really, well, I say it was enjoyable. The experience was tremendous. The running obviously was hard. Absolutely hard.
Even imagine.
Yeah.
I've never finished a marathon and then thought, you know what, I'm going to do that 10 more times.
No, your immediate reaction is, right, shoes in the bin. I'm never going to do another one. But yeah, that's normal. And once you get over that, the euphoria, I've done it. I've actually done it. And even if you've had a bad run, you sort of think, well, okay, that hasn't gone the way I wanted it, but it's preparation for the next one. It's not wasted effort. It's not, a waste. It might have been a wasted opportunity, but things get in the way, and they don't always go as you would like them. But you've got to take the positives out of it. So, your race hasn't gone well, but it's the training is there. It's that you haven't lost that background. It's still there. So you pick yourself up and think, right, I'm going to focus on the next one. What's down the line? And, it's, it's a good sport. I started competing when I was 14. And in fact, my elder brother tells me I was 9 when I did my first run. He was going out for a training run, and I'd said to him, "Can I come?" And he said, "Well, if you're ready in an hour or whatever it was, be ready." And then I went out with him, just obviously not training, but just enjoying as a kid, running with my elder brothers. I'm still running today.
That's great.
Nearly 78, and I run every day. I compete in half marathons. I do well in my age group.
I can imagine.
Yes, it really is. To be still fit and healthy and active, and able to enjoy sport that I've been involved in all my life is just tremendous.
I love to hear that. And I think so many of us that are runners, and I'm the same way. Obviously I'm 33, so I haven't made it as many decades, but I started as a child as well. And so seeing somebody who had so much success and who's still running on such a regular basis after all these decades, I love to hear it. It is such a huge inspiration. That's fantastic. Now, let's talk a little bit about Badwater in 1987. So this was half a world away. This is Death Valley, California. Obviously much hotter than pretty much everywhere on Earth, but especially England. Y'all are known for having such a much chillier, rainier climate.
Right.
So What were your feelings when you get there and it's hot, it's the middle of the summer, it is dry? What were you thinking leading up to starting this race?
Well, Death Valley, to me in England, Death Valley it wasn't just half a world away. It was, it was off the planet, if you
Yeah.
like. Somewhere that I would never, ever have thought I would get to. And I love travel and I love going to new places and seeing them. So, yes, I knew it was going to be hot and I'd heard all the tales about it. But, and I had no opportunity to acclimatize. But I still wanted to go. I wanted to see, this was an opportunity for me, and there was no way I was going to turn it down. It was a huge, huge challenge, and I like challenges. I don't do easy. It's just not in my thinking. If it's easy, I don't want to know. Um, and this was a enormous challenge, and there was nothing really I could do to prepare myself for it, other than my normal training for a race of this length. So I went into it very scared, and I made a huge error uh, with the conditions, which could have absolutely cost me the race. But it didn't. And the one good thing about ultra running is that you do have time to recover from, you 1 minute you think you're absolutely exhausted, you're out of it, there's no way that you can go on. But if you just give your body chance to recover a little, you can pull it back if you are mentally strong enough to do so. And I went into Death Valley. It was a huge gamble, but it was a challenge. And I mean, it wasn't just going through Death Valley. I mean, it was getting to the top of Mount Whitney at the end of it, which was covered in snow. So you were not only going from running in the heat, you also had to contend with the complete contrast in the change of climate at the top of the mountain. But it was the heat that worried me considerably. But the opportunity to experience it overrode everything else. I mean, 147 mile, I think it was, didn't concern me at all. It was just the heat and how I was going to manage it and adapt to it. The whole challenge thing, the team race and the rest of it sort of passed me by. I didn't get involved in that. All I was interested in was getting from Death Valley to the top of Mount Whitney as best as I could. And that's what I focused on the whole of the way through, was what I was doing, how to manage my body. And the one mistake that I did make, because it really was hot, at the end of Death Valley, I think it was Stovepipe Wells. Am I correct in thinking that? There's a motel there. And I thought, well, that will be a good point to have a break. And my partner, that Ken Critchlow, that I was running with or teamed with, had said, well, look, book the motel room and then you use it and then I'll use it, following on, because I'm going to be behind you. I can use it afterwards. So I thought, oh, that would be great. I can go in, I can have a shower, I can have a rest, I can cool off. But of course, what I hadn't understood and nobody had actually mentioned, had thought about it either. I went into the motel room for half an hour, and of course it was bliss, absolute bliss, air conditioning, lovely shower, laid down. And then when my half hour's up, I walked out of the door and I I nearly keeled over. The heat was like a furnace.
Opening an oven,
Absolutely.
I bet.
The whole thing, like exactly, just opening the door and this hot air nearly, it nearly knocked me over. And I just couldn't believe it. That, anyway, I had a good lead over the American couple who were running. But obviously I'd lost half an hour. But I tell you what, that next bit of, and then of course I was out there going up a climb is it Lone Pine? Oh, do you know, I should have had a look at all this before I came in. But I can remember climbing and going up this tarmac road, up and up and up and up, and just feeling absolutely out of it. I can't begin to explain how what an effect this was on my body. But I was in there to do the best I could, and I just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and then I just keep going. And at one point, the Americans got very close to me. I could see them down the road, or see their torches, because I believe it was sort of dusk time then. But I kept climbing. And of course, although I was climbing up, I was getting into cooler temperatures, and it was evening and it was getting dark. And of course, I began to recover. And once I had recovered from that, and I just kicked myself. How could you be so, what a mistake to make? But it was complete ignorance, of the conditions and the effect that they would have. And nobody thought about it either. And this is what startled me afterwards, thinking about it. These people who lived there, surely somebody, and they were medics involved in this, doing testing and things. And not a single person had said to me, "Are you sure this is the right thing to do?"
Wow.
It was complete, as I say, ignorance from my part. But I just thought afterwards, why on earth didn't somebody on the ground, so to speak, realize this? Because, that could have completely finished the whole challenge.
Wow.
Just 40 mile or whatever it was that we'd covered. But it didn't. I pulled myself together and got going. And shortly afterwards, I could see Mount Whitney with the snow on the top, and that's the next challenge. But yeah, it was an amazing thing to go through, and there was a lot of medical, scientific stuff going on in that. When I finished, I wasn't able to just crawl away and go and lie down. I was whisked off to this medical tent or room somewhere, and had needles stuck in my arm and all sorts of tests done, which I had consented to. I thought, you find out what you can out of this, so that other people can, whatever you're looking for is going to be of use to somebody somewhere along the line. And funnily enough, while I was laid on the bed, the guy that was doing the testing rang somebody else to get the results of whatever it was they'd sent in. And I could hear the conversation quite plainly. And the chap on the other end of the telephone, when he had got the results, said quite clearly, "Is this woman still alive?" And I said, "Yes, I am." Very much so. So it was all, looking back afterwards, it was a tremendous experience. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. But yeah, I got there, I did it. It was a challenge, and I'd come out on top. So I was happy.
Early on, and there was the time where the couple behind you got close to you, but you ended up finishing multiple hours in front of them. So you would have spent the entire race alone. You were running alone the whole time. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I had a support crew with me, but obviously they weren't allowed to run.
Yeah.
They were just able to give me drinks and food, and I think they weighed me every 2 miles, which was a bit of a bind. But
every 2 miles?
well, I don't recall it going on for the whole race.
Okay.
Whether I just said, "Look, I've had enough of this," I don't know. But yeah, to start off with, they were doing sort of tests on me as I was running, but I think eventually they probably gave up. I really can't remember, to be honest. But they did ask before if I would take part in this, this not experiment, but it's collecting information as to what was happening to the body when it was put under such extreme conditions. And I thought that'd be quite interesting. Why not? But yeah, I mean, it was, they did get quite close, but I had to forget about that and just concentrate on me and recovering and then obviously as I got further and further away from them, I could relax about, they're not breathing down my neck. I just run my own race, and it worked out well. In fact, when I got to Whitney Portal, which is where the road stops, they had a guide there to take me up the mountaintop. And I remember getting quite annoyed because this guide wasn't ready. And he should have known where I was. And I mean, obviously there was no mobile phones in those days, and so it's not like the setup would be today, but I was still annoyed because I had to wait for him. Come on, buddy, I want to be up there. And we did have to, it was a walk, a scramble, a climb up the last few miles to the top. But yeah, come on, I want to be off. You should be ready.
Wow.
But it was good.
And was the goal always to win outright, or like when traveling all the way to California, did you have in your mind that you would be out there to win the entire race?
No, I wanted to do the best that I could. I had no idea what I was letting myself in for in terms of opposition or terrain, climate, the whole lot. I mean, just climbing the mountain on its own was a huge challenge. Let alone
absolutely.
Having to run 100 and odd miles before you did it. So the whole experience was just, I'm going into this, I'm going to do the best that I can. And if I win, great. If I don't, I will have achieved the challenge. And that was always my aim, whatever I was doing, whether it was a world championship. Yes, I wanted to win, but I still wanted to do the best that I could. If somebody was better than me, so be it. I got no control over anybody else. The only person that I could control was myself and what I could do. And that was always the case throughout my races.
That's such a great way to that's a great reminder for everybody, no matter, if you're in the front of the pack, you're out there to win, or middle of the pack or anything, just running your own race. That's such a great reminder. Now, in the 80s, fueling within marathons was kind of hit or miss. A lot of people would just do water, maybe Gatorade. Obviously, for something as long as Badwater, you can't just rely on water and Gatorade. So what did your fueling strategy look like?
Pretty much what you said, actually. There was a new product on the line, British product, Lepin, which was a bit like Gatorade, I suppose. Tasted disgusting, and I didn't like it at all. But the one thing I did find was that I had difficulty eating.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, quite why I turned out to be a good mega ultra runner. I'm not sure because I couldn't sleep and I couldn't eat. But I still turned out to be pretty good at doing these long distances. So I pretty much existed on water. And no matter how much water you take, your mouth always feels dry. You always feel dehydrated. You just, because if you take too much, you're just bloated and uncomfortable and you get stitch and then you're sick. So it was just pretty much sips of water or, a mouthful of water every 20 minutes, every half hour. If I was eating, I couldn't take anything solid. So it was stuff like ice cream, yogurt, soup, mashed potato, maybe. And of course, it was just normal food, as soggy and as wet as possible. Because that was the only way you could get it down.
Yeah.
And if I was doing like a 6-day race or a multi-day race where I'd got a rest break, then I would have what I call substantial meal, or I would have normal, maybe a bit of pasta, mashed potato with scrambled egg or something like that. And then I would take a sleep break so that the food would digest while I was laid down. But while I was actually running on the track or on the road, I mean, it was just a bit of orange, a bit of, a drink of soup or just ordinary normal food, because that's all that was available.
Yeah, there weren't gels, there weren't any of that yet. So that's crazy just to think about. You're in the middle of the desert, just having some soup and getting on your way.
Yeah. Porridge was good, anything that was very, very moist was about the only thing that I could take.
Wow. That's crazy. Well, Eleanor, I will not take up too much more of your time. I just have one final question. You finish the race, you win, not just for women, but outright. You win the very first Badwater Ultramarathon. What was going through your mind?
I really don't know. I mean, I was always overwhelmed at the end of these sort of events, world championships, or that I had done it, that it was, little me, that just an ordinary person with no particular ambition or huge ambitions, no great desires, didn't want anything really. I've never been somebody that hankered after a lot of money or a lot of possessions or, expensive, anything like that. I just wanted to enjoy life and to see what I could get out of it. And I was, I was just enjoying things. And yes, it was hard, but that was part of it. As I said, if it had been easy, I wouldn't have been interested.
Absolutely.
And I just, I was just really sort of overwhelmed. Am I world champion? How has this happened? It happened.
That's incredible.
Hard work.
Yeah.
Absolutely hard work.
That's amazing.
I trained 3 times a day.
Wow.
If I was working, I would get up and run 6 or 7 miles before I went to work. I'd run 6 miles in my dinner hour or hour and a half. We used to have as a teacher then, an hour and a quarter, whatever. And then when I'd get home, when the kids were in bed, I'd do another 7 miles. I was running 140 miles a week and racing every weekend because I loved to race. So, every marathon I could find, I would do. But it didn't matter what it was. If it was 800 meter on the track or a marathon race, then I was there. I just wanted to be part of it all.
That's so incredible. Well, thank you so much, Eleanor. This has been fantastic. It's been so great to hear about your journey. And I'm so glad to hear that that journey is continuing.
Okay, that's lovely. Thank you very much.
Wow, that is just so cool. And something I absolutely love about ultramarathoning is how level the playing field is between men and women, and that it is not at all uncommon to see a woman win outright, like Eleanor Robinson did back in 1987. In 1988 and 1989, Badwater followed the same route, but because the summit of Mount Whitney cannot be accessed legally, race organizers moved the finish to the Whitney Portal starting in 1990. That reduced the overall mileage of Badwater from the original 146 to the current 135. Badwater has happened every year since 1987, with the exception of 2020, due, of course, to the COVID pandemic, and not once have more than 100 athletes began the race. This year's race happened the first week of this month, and one of the biggest headlines out of this edition was that 80-year-old Floridian Bob Becker became the oldest athlete to finish Badwater. 80 years old, and he made it 135 miles through multiple mountains with temperatures over 120 degrees. Seriously, just incredible. That is all I have for today's episode. A huge thank you to Eleanor Robinson for chatting with me, and to each and every one of y'all for continuing to tune in. Please make sure to like, subscribe, comment, share, rate the show 5 stars, and then send this episode to every single ultra runner that you have ever met. And then join me tomorrow as we head back to the 1930s to meet the first Black athlete to win 2 Olympic gold medals. I'm your host, Running Up That Hillary, and this has been Today in Running History. In the 15 years or so leading up to the inaugural Badwater. God, and I was on such a roll, I hadn't even messed up yet. Look at that. That's a record. Balling and Crutchlow, or is it Clutchlow? I wrote this. Clutchlow, I just wrote it wrong. Clutchlow, right? Yeah. All right, and then here's the interview. Hi, Eleanor. Oh, hi, Hillary. I'm so excited to be here. You're amazing. Oh, thank you. You're pretty amazing too. Oh, wow. Okay. That was the interview. This year's race happened the first week of the month, and this month, okay. This year's race happened the first. I'm almost there. I am almost through the episode. I actually did pretty decent this time. Let's just get through this last little paragraph.